Welcome back to the Missing 411 podcast. For centuries, there's been a stretch of ocean that has captured our collective imagination, a place that has become synonymous with the unexplainable. They call it the Devil's Triangle, the Hoodoo Sea, but you know it best as the Bermuda Triangle. It's a vast, ill-defined area of the North Atlantic between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico. For generations, we've been told it's a place where the laws of physics seem to bend, where compasses spin wildly, and where ships and planes simply vanish, gone without a trace. The ocean is vast, so why does this one particular patch of it hold such a dark reputation? How do we explain a mystery so strange, so terrifying? Tonight, we're charting a course directly into the heart of the legend. We'll separate the facts from the fiction, examine the most chilling cases on record, and ask the question: is the Bermuda Triangle a supernatural vortex, a paranormal graveyard, or something else entirely? Let's begin. The mystery of the Bermuda Triangle didn't start with a bang. It started with a whisper, recorded in the journal of the most famous mariner of all, Christopher Columbus. It's surprising, isn't it? The first European to document the New World was also one of the first to document the strangeness of this region. On October 8, 1492, as his fleet sailed near the area we now call the Triangle, Columbus noted in his log that his compass readings went haywire. The needle wasn't pointing to the North Star. He saw strange lights in the sky, what he described as a great flame of fire that crashed into the sea. Now, Columbus and his crew made it back to Spain safely, but the seeds of a legend were planted. A story of a bizarre, magnetic, and unpredictable sea. For centuries, these were just sailors' tales. But the modern legend, the one we know today, truly began to take shape in the mid-20th century. In 1950, an Associated Press writer named E.V. W. Jones wrote an article cataloging a series of strange disappearances of ships and planes in the area. He highlighted several prominent cases, including the vanishing of 5 U.S. Navy bombers in 1945 and 2 commercial airliners in 48 and 49. Over 130 people had vanished in these incidents alone, and the numbers kept growing. The idea of a cursed triangle really hit the mainstream in 1974, with the publication of a blockbuster book by Charles Berlitz called The Bermuda Triangle. The book was a sensation, selling over 20 million copies. It meticulously documented dozens of disappearances, weaving them together into a single, terrifying narrative and offering speculative theories involving everything from aliens and time warps to technology left behind by the lost city of Atlantis. Berlitz cemented the triangle in our minds as a place where the rules don't apply. But to understand the legend, you have to understand the case that started it all. We need to talk about Flight 19. December 5, 1945. It was a clear, beautiful afternoon at the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A squadron of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, call sign Flight 19, roared to life on the runway. Their mission for the day was routine, a 3-hour combat training exercise. The plan was simple. They would fly east out over the Atlantic, conduct bombing practice at a place called the Hen and Chicken Shoals, fly north for a stretch, and then turn southwest for the final leg back to base. A standard navigational triangle. The only remarkable thing about their flight path was that it would take them directly through the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. The flight leader was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, a seasoned pilot and a combat veteran. He knew these skies. The other 13 men in the squadron were trainees, but they were all competent airmen. This was supposed to be a milk run. The planes took off and headed east. The sun was out, the sea was calm. Everything was nominal. But it didn't stay that way. About 2 hours into the flight, long after they should have completed their bombing runs and turned north, a disturbing radio transmission crackled into the control tower back in Fort Lauderdale. It was Taylor, the flight leader, but his voice wasn't calm and confident. It was confused. He reported that his compasses, both of them, were malfunctioning. They were just spinning. He couldn't get a reading. Immediately, the tower asked him to switch to his backup instruments. The reply was chilling. The backup compass was doing the same thing. Lost and blind, Taylor had no idea where he was. He asked his wingmen for their positions, but their compasses were also reportedly acting erratically. The radio operator in Fort Lauderdale listened as confusion turned to panic. Taylor's voice came through the static. "I don't know where we are," he said. "We must have gotten lost after that last turn." Based on his last known position, Navy procedure was crystal clear. If you get lost off the coast of Florida, just fly west. Head towards the setting sun and you will hit land. It's that simple. But Taylor became convinced of a fatal error. For some reason, he believed the strong winds had blown them far off course, over the Gulf of Mexico. He saw islands below and thought they were the Florida Keys, when in reality they were most likely the Bahamas. This single, critical mistake sealed their fate. Believing he was in the Gulf, he ordered his squadron to fly northeast, thinking it would take them back over Florida. It was the exact opposite of what he should have done. He was leading his men deeper and deeper into the vast, empty Atlantic. A senior flight instructor on the ground could hear the radio chatter. He heard some of Taylor's pilots begin to question his command. One pilot's voice came through, clearly distressed. "If we would just fly west, we would get home." The argument grew more heated, but in the end, they followed their commander's orders. As the afternoon wore on, the weather began to turn. The seas grew rough, the sky darkened. The radio signal from Flight 19 grew weaker and weaker. The last transmission the tower ever heard from Charles Taylor was faint. His voice laced with resignation. "We're running out of fuel," he said. "We'll have to ditch. Prepare to land in the water." And then, silence. Just like that, 5 U.S. Navy aircraft and 14 men were gone. But the tragedy of Flight 19 wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As soon as the tower realized Flight 19 was in serious trouble, a massive search and rescue operation was launched. Among the aircraft scrambled was a PBM Martin Mariner flying boat, a huge aircraft with a crew of 13 men. It took off into the darkening sky, heading for Flight 19's last known position. But this time, it didn't take 2 hours for things to go wrong. Just 20 minutes after takeoff, the Martin Mariner vanished from radar. There was no distress call, no final message. It was just gone. The only clue came from the crew of a nearby oil tanker, the SS Gaines Mills. They reported seeing a massive fireball in the sky, a huge explosion, right around the time and place the rescue plane disappeared. They raced to the location and found a large oil slick on the surface of the water, but nothing else. The Navy's immediate conclusion was grim but logical. The Martin Mariner had a nickname among pilots, the Flying Gas Tank. Its fuel vapors were notoriously prone to ignition from a single spark. They believed the plane had simply exploded in midair. The next morning, one of the largest air and sea searches in history was underway. For 5 days, over 300 ships and aircraft scoured more than 250,000 square miles of ocean. They searched for Flight 19. They searched for the Martin Mariner. They found nothing. Not a single life raft. Not a piece of wreckage. Not one body. It was as if 6 airplanes and 27 men had been completely erased from the planet. One search party member later said, "They vanished as completely as if they'd flown to Mars." The official Navy report, released after months of investigation, concluded that the loss of Flight 19 was due to causes or reasons unknown. They blamed Lieutenant Taylor's disorientation and confusion for leading his men out to sea. They officially attributed the loss of the Martin Mariner to an in-flight explosion. But for a public hungry for answers, this wasn't enough. How could 6 military aircraft just disappear? The speculation began immediately. Had they been taken by aliens? Swallowed by a portal in time? The modern legend of the Bermuda Triangle had its foundational story. While Flight 19 is the Triangle's most famous mystery, it's far from the only one. Decades earlier, long before the term Bermuda Triangle even existed, the U.S. Navy suffered a loss so profound it remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries in its history. This is the story of the USS Cyclops. The Cyclops was a beast. At 542 feet long, she was a massive Proteus-class collier, essentially a giant floating fuel carrier for the Navy. In her time, she was one of the largest ships in the fleet, a symbol of American industrial might. People said a ship that big was practically unsinkable. In March of 1918, during the final year of World War I, the Cyclops was on a return journey from Brazil to Baltimore. On board were 306 crew members and passengers. Her cargo hold was filled with 11,000 tons of manganese ore, a dense and heavy material crucial for steel production. Her route would take her right through the future Bermuda Triangle. The ship made a brief, unscheduled stop in Barbados and then set sail for Baltimore on March 4th. It was the last time anyone ever saw her. The USS Cyclops never arrived in Baltimore. She never sent a distress signal. No SOS. No radio call reporting bad weather or engine trouble. The ship, along with all 306 souls aboard, simply vanished. The Navy launched a massive investigation, but it was like searching for a ghost. They had no idea where the ship could have gone down. There was no wreckage, no debris, no bodies. It was a total mystery. President Woodrow Wilson himself said, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." Of course, theories immediately began to fly. The most obvious one was enemy action. This was wartime, after all. Had a German U-boat torpedoed her? But after the war, German naval records were meticulously checked. There were no U-boats operating in that area at that time. Another theory centered on the ship's captain, George W. Worley. Worley was an eccentric and reportedly tyrannical commander, despised by many of his crew. More intriguingly, he was German-born. The theory went that Worley was a German sympathizer or an outright spy who had hijacked his own ship and handed it over to the Germans. But again, there was zero evidence from either the US or German side to support this. The most plausible, if mundane, explanation was structural failure. Perhaps it encountered a sudden, violent storm, and the sheer weight of the shifting cargo caused the hull to buckle. But without a wreck, it's all just speculation. For over a century, the final resting place of the USS Cyclops and the 306 people aboard has remained one of the ocean's deepest secrets. So, you have these incredible stories. Flight 19, the USS Cyclops, and dozens of others. It's easy to see why theories involving aliens, time warps, and lost Atlantean technology took hold. These explanations are as epic as the tragedies themselves. They offer a sense of wonder, a feeling that we don't know everything about our own world. But what does science have to say? For decades, researchers, oceanographers, and meteorologists have been chipping away at the myth of the Bermuda Triangle, offering rational explanations for its seemingly supernatural phenomena. And when you look at the evidence, the mystery starts to look a lot less mysterious. Let's start with the compasses. The story of Christopher Columbus and Lieutenant Charles Taylor seeing their compasses spin wildly is a cornerstone of the legend. But is there a strange magnetic force at work? The answer is no. What they likely experienced is a completely natural phenomenon called magnetic declination. Your compass needle points to the magnetic North Pole, not the geographic North Pole. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the few places on the planet where, for a time, magnetic north and true north lined up perfectly. There's no supernatural force. It's just basic navigation. What about the fact that no wreckage is ever found? The ocean in this region holds a powerful secret, the Gulf Stream. Think of it as a massive, fast-moving river within the ocean. It flows out of the Gulf of Mexico and rips through the triangle at speeds up to 4.5 miles per hour. Any wreckage from a downed plane or a sunken ship would be caught in this immense current and could be carried hundreds of miles away from its last reported position in a very short time. Then there's the weather. The Caribbean Atlantic region is notorious for its violent and unpredictable weather. But there's another, even more insidious threat: rogue waves. For a long time, these were considered myths, single, monstrous waves, sometimes over 100 feet tall, that could appear out of nowhere even in calm seas. We now have satellite data to prove they are very real. A wave like that could easily swallow a ship like the USS Cyclops whole, sending it to the bottom in seconds. Perhaps the most exotic scientific theory involves methane hydrates. The seafloor in this region is rich with vast, frozen deposits of methane gas. The theory suggests that a sudden release of this gas would create a huge area of frothy, bubbling water with dramatically reduced density. Any ship sailing over it would instantly lose its buoyancy and sink like a stone. While this is scientifically plausible, geologists say the last major methane eruption in the area likely happened thousands of years ago. But the most powerful debunking of the Bermuda Triangle mystery doesn't come from any single theory. It comes from simple logic and statistics, championed by people like Australian scientist Carl Kruszelnicki. Kruszelnicki argues that the Bermuda Triangle is a complete fabrication. His reasoning is simple. The mystery is a product of cherry-picked stories, misinformation, and a failure to consider the sheer volume of traffic in the area. The triangle is one of the most heavily trafficked shipping and flight corridors in the world. Thousands of boats and planes pass through it safely every single week. He states, according to Lloyd's of London and the U.S. Coast Guard, the number of planes that go missing in the Bermuda Triangle is the same as anywhere else in the world on a percentage basis. There is nothing statistically unusual about the number of disappearances. We just hear about them more because of the legend. Kruszelnicki even re-examined the Flight 19 case. He points out that, contrary to the legend of a clear day, weather reports showed conditions were deteriorating rapidly that afternoon, with high winds and rough seas. He notes that while Lieutenant Taylor was an experienced combat pilot, he had a history of getting lost, having twice had to ditch his plane in the Pacific. And the most damning piece of evidence? The transcript proves that Taylor ignored the suggestion of one of his pilots to fly west, a decision that led them all to their deaths in the deep Atlantic. It wasn't a paranormal force. It was a cascade of human error compounded by bad weather. As for the rescue plane, the Martin Mariner, it didn't vanish. There were multiple witnesses who saw it explode. It was a known mechanical flaw. The mystery is only a mystery if you ignore the facts. So, if the statistics don't support it, if the U.S. Coast Guard doesn't recognize it, and if nearly every famous case has a plausible, rational explanation, why does the legend of the Bermuda Triangle endure? Perhaps it's because we want it to. In a world that feels increasingly mapped, measured, and explained, there's a deep human craving for mystery. We want there to be dragons on the map, blank spots where incredible things can happen. The Bermuda Triangle provides that. It's a testament to the power of a good story. A story of a place where the known world ends and the unimaginable begins. The reality is that the ocean is a vast, powerful, and unforgiving place. The combination of its immense depth, the violence of its weather, and the fallibility of human beings is more than enough to account for the tragedies that have occurred there. We don't need aliens or time warps to explain why we lose people to the sea. The sea itself is explanation enough. The true story of the Bermuda Triangle isn't about the supernatural. It's about the very real men and women who were lost, and the families who were left behind with no answers. Their stories deserve to be told not as paranormal fodder, but as cautionary tales of the awesome and often tragic power of the natural world. Thank you for joining us on the Missing 411 podcast. We'll be back next time with another investigation into the unexplained. Until then, stay safe and keep searching for the truth.